as you can hear, I don't speak Italian. I'm from beautiful Vienna, city of fatty foods, classical architecture, and beautiful women. Sometimes you're just not that lucky, but we love it. It's not meant in any bad way. I work for Elastic, for search, the search guys, Elastic Stack, logging, whatever. And I'm in the infrastructure team, and that here is actually a pipe. I kind of pipe what I do in the infrastructure team into my developer advocacy. So this is now the output of what I do in the infrastructure team. And in Vienna, I also run some meetups, one about databases, go figure, and one more on the academic side, where we read papers and discuss them. Okay, so let's dive in. Do you have anything to confess? Or are you still in denial? Is it like anything you want to talk about right now? Or shall we get started? Okay. What is this? Gluttony. The overindulgence and overconsumption of anything to the point of waste. So I guess most of you are Java developers, right? So let's see. The first thing is kind of like add all the dependencies, which is just like throw it in your Gradle or Maven file and yeah, let's figure out what we need afterwards. Which is probably not the best idea because of memory. So permanent space, or in Java 8 and above, metaspace, it just uses a lot of memory, which, yeah, you will feel it at some point. And the second thing is, if you package your Java WAR files, you need to transfer them. So every time you deploy, your network will feel it, your disk will feel it. Don't do that. The solution would be put your stuff on a diet. So for example, if you're on Amazon, I'm kind of a child of the cloud, everything is on Amazon, and you often need their APIs. Previously, they had one big fat jar for everything, even if you just needed one tiny bit of their infrastructure. And luckily, now they've kind of slimmed it down, put it on a diet. They have a base jar, which is, yeah, basically nothing. And then you get the different pieces you just need. For example, in your project, if you just say, I need to do something with their instances and the storage space S3, just include those two. And just modularize it. But, as we've already heard in the keynote, you can also overdo it. Even though the Java space is probably more immune to that, I'm more talking about NPM, where you could, at least in the past, unpublish stuff, and you had every dependency for 12 lines of code, or 11, and whatever. Don't do that. The other thing is, combine all the projects. Microservices are all the rage. Even though I still would be careful with that. So at the moment we have microservices. In the future we might have something like nanoservices, Pico, Femto, Atto. And I think the smallest thing I could find is Yocto. So once you've reached Yocto services, you cannot go any further down. Yocto services are probably like you make one service for each function or method, and then you've kind of reached the very bottom or top, depending on how you see it. And in theory, that sounds cool. In practice, maybe it just doesn't look that nice. So for example, on the left-hand side, in theory it looks nice. In practice, yeah, depending on your taste, probably not so much. So that would probably be the Yocto service you could run into. Yeah, and then of course, this Gartner hype cycle. It's probably the only cool thing Gartner ever made, and that's kind of to the point of what's actually happening. And I'm still not sure where we are with microservices at the moment. I'm maybe at the peak of inflated expectations. Others would probably say we are already on the plateau of productivity and have never gone through the trial of disillusionment. But yeah, your mileage may vary. And I would say, yes, it helps if you have too many people on a project, if you have too many dependencies and you cannot manage them, and you need to scale some independent parts of your application, then of course, go for microservices. But remember, you're trading pain. There are these classics like 8 fallacies of distributed computing. Thank you, son. So yes, there are network problems, there is overhead, and if you want something more up-to-date and practical, there is a very nice blog post, Notes on Distributed Systems for Youngblood, from Jeff Hodges, who was at Twitter for a long time. You still remember the fail whale? You probably haven't seen it in a long time because Twitter has kind of grown up and they learned a lot. And yeah, this is also distilled what they learned into one blog post, what the problems are with distributed systems. And the main difference between a monolith and a distributed system is distributed systems fail, they fail independently and in parts. That will make your life harder. Not network overhead, not latency, anything. It's just like stuff will every now and then break in your system. So microservices now are probably SOA done right. Probably. Back in the SOAP days, there was this, WS Death Star. So for every problem you had a product and you could just throw it at your your IBM solution and WS Death Star would take care of it. So these days are kind of behind us. We have no enterprise service bus anymore we throw stuff against. Now it's just HTTP, REST, and life is better. Will this solve all your problems? Unfortunately, I'm afraid it won't. So coming back to Star Wars, what do you think this is? Yeah, well, 2 microservices and a shared database. So independently on their own, they're very nice, but once you have like this big shared thing underlying it, microservices don't probably make all that much sense because you cannot scale totally independently. It's just like, yeah, you have these things moving around in your system, which might be nice, but it's probably not the full experience you want to get. And then there are people who say, don't consider microservices because they're just too complex. At least in the beginning of projects, it's just too much overhead. And the majority of systems should not start as a microservice, but as a monolith. And do proper software engineering, separate your modules the right way, but don't distribute them right now. So this is what Martin Fowler somehow put out. And then there are the people who say, yeah, microservices, the bandwagon exists. The problem is we just need a cooler name for monolith. So if we called monolith something like Mega Platform, Uber Container, or Stereolith, they would be cool again, and everybody would start using them. And it's just another trend we need to start. And like software, everything is like these extremes. Currently, it's microservices. In the future, it might be monolith or stereolith or whatever back again. And everybody repeat after me. I'm not Facebook, Google, or Amazon. So this is kind of the assumption like, yeah, Netflix is doing it like this, so I need to do it like this as well, which is probably not true for 80% of the people. Yeah, whatever. So the next one is easier to spot, greed. For greed, I just have a single slide. If you still remember, don't do that. Who's used JBoss in like a very early version, besides me? Was it a good experience? No? Okay. For me, my experience was it needed 5 minutes to start up. A redeploy took 120 seconds, and after like 3 or 4 redeploys, it would just out of memory, and you would need to restart from scratch, which was not the nicest experience. I know stuff has changed. Now there's Wildfly, but I'm still like pretty much against these big application servers because they're very greedy. Just take all the resources and throw stuff at them, and they will take care of the rest for you. That's not the approach I really like for the deployments. Okay. What's this? Sloth, exactly. Laziness. Here I try to be a bit more productive. So continuous integration, build and test every step. Who is doing continuous integration? Okay. So every push gets built. The next step would be you can manually deploy something to production. You would probably automatically deploy to development or staging or whatever you have. So that's continuous delivery. And on the top, there sits continuous deployment, automate production deployments. So this is kind of the full thing you can reach. Just to keep it in mind, and if you want to throw more buzzwords at it, you have your code, and if you are doing an agile development approach, whatever that means in your environment, that's kind of the basis. Then you have continuous integration. Everything gets built automatically. Continuous delivery will deploy it, but not to production, and continuous deployment will actually throw it over to production automatically. And to put another buzzword on top, if you do all of these things, you're probably doing DevOps or something else. So who is doing continuous deployment? Not a single one? Okay. Because I would argue, is continuous deployment really a requirement for your business? But since nobody is doing, that's now hard to argue, I guess. Yeah. How to do that? I've always used Jenkins. Who's using Jenkins? Yeah, okay, the majority. So Jenkins is mostly nice and will do your stuff, but sometimes not. Yeah, sometimes you have the Jerkins, the robot is failing on purpose. Sometimes you have the Jenkins, it's failing due to incompetence, which might be sometimes the case. And then you have Jenkins, where it's just for no good reason stuff is failing in your environment. So this is Jenkins, but probably it's not Jenkins' fault, but it's more your fault. But it can, of course, be daunting. What I like most about Jenkins are these two features. First, I can release my stuff on Jenkins. I can simply say, I don't know, whatever new version I want to run or produce, just do that for me. I click a single button. It does automatically tag the thing on Git if I use Git. It will take out the snapshot version, put in the new release version, push my release version wherever I store them, Nexus, JFrog, whatever, and then put in the next snapshot version again. So this is fully automated. I don't need to do anything for release. It will just cover everything for me. And the next thing is, if you don't want to deploy to production automatically, you can just give it a promotion feature. So you can promote with a single manual click or reaching some kind of state you want to reach, you can automatically promote to different environments. So I've used this in the past. I would promote automatically for development, where stuff would get deployed to development automatically. But if I want to go to production, I would just need to click one button in Jenkins, and only then would the stuff be promoted for production, and I could roll it out, which is also kind of a good safeguard. And one other thing I've learned is separate code and configuration. So if you have like your certificates in whatever you want to deploy, that's probably hurting you in the long run. For example, you have a big security bug like Heartbleed, and your certificates might be compromised, and you need to re-roll your certificates. If you have baked in your certificates into whatever you deploy, you will need to rebake all your jars or WAR files, which is painful. So I always try to keep every configuration, which is both password, certificates, whatever, separate from the code. So once I've done a release, that's final. But if I need to change a password, I can just do it on the fly, and I don't need to actually touch any of my code bases. Just re-roll whatever you have done, and I hope you have automated everything. Then it's pretty painless just to change passwords and adjust. Okay, moving right on. That is lust. Intense and uncontrolled desire to do something. And for IT folks, that's normally this. Always use the hottest stuff. And the hottest stuff, I'll just take one example. There's a Docker talk later today, so I need to be careful. So who's actually using containers in production? Yeah, nobody, okay. Who's using containers in development? Okay. Isn't it kind of the point of containers just to take the container and use it locally, then put it to development, and then put it to production? No? Okay, but my approach is always, why do I have a dev environment? I want to make sure that production is working. But if I test dev differently than production? Dev tooling, okay. but then it's not really for the deployment purpose, but just the tooling for development. Okay, that's another use case which, yeah, sure might help. But I have always the feeling that the Docker train is mostly pushing like, our big feature is you just take the same thing you do locally, put it to development, and then do it in production, if this is your pain point. And what you actually try to get around is it works on my machine. And I'm sure everybody has this colleague, like at least I have had them, who always say like, it's working on my machine. And at some point you can just tell them, okay, I've given up, back up your email, your laptop is now going to production, because obviously it's only working on your machine and I don't care. And Docker is kind of the way around, but I'm always arguing Docker is the only thing Docker gives you. There should be an animation. Now it is. This is what Docker gives you. Like you have these separated independent things which are nice and bounce around on their own, and you've packaged them nicely up, but this doesn't give you like the full application. And yeah, now what actually? What are we going to do? So the other problems are containers will not fix your broken architecture. You're welcome. Which probably looks something like this. So each of the containers on their own is doing very well. So the containers on themselves are holding up pretty well, but like the entire system is probably not doing that well. So with the Mesos talk later today, or is it Kubernetes? I always mix the two up. You try to get around that and get to keep the upper hand and keep everything in sync and up and running nicely. But this is still like a major problem. So Docker is nice, but it's just like one step if you have the problem that it's running differently in different environments and you want to work around that, then Docker can be a solution. But otherwise, it's probably not solving your problems, or it never has been for me. And the other thing is glibc. There was recently a major security bug. Now you need to re-image all your Docker images, right? Just to get rid of that. So while Docker is nice, it doesn't really solve all your security concerns. You still need an automated fashion to re-roll your Docker images. And now I know people will say there's Alpine Linux. There is no glibc there. The problem is anybody using Alpine? Okay. Working as expected? Yeah, right. That's exactly the point. Like, you want to get rid of glibc because it's big and arcane and has probably security issues. But on the other hand, glibc is the one thing more or less everybody relies on. So if I'm not mistaken, without glibc, there is no Oracle JDK. There's not even OpenJDK, or for OpenJDK, there is just the runtime environment, but there's no JDK officially supported. And this is something we are at Elastic currently discussing internally. Like building Docker images, yes, we need to do that. Everybody wants Docker images, so we need to provide them. The problem is, if we do it with Ubuntu, it's pretty big. So we're talking like, I don't know, like 800 megabytes, a gigabyte, whatever, for a container, which is pretty big just to roll out one component. With Alpine, it would be much smaller. The problem is there's no glibc. It's not really tested yet. We would need to pull in Alpine for the full testing matrix and make sure everything works. And we're still not really sure if that's worth it or not. Let's see. And I don't know, who has seen that? Hitler uses Docker? Yeah, that's pretty awesome. I'm not showing you the full video. It's just less than 4 minutes. It's pretty cool. And he's pretty much repeating what everybody else is saying. Where he's throwing out... So the film is Der Untergang, The Downfall, where Hitler is sitting in his bunker and yeah, everything goes wrong. And yeah, in this case, everything with Docker goes wrong. And he throws out everybody who's not using Docker in production, and then he's like left with 4 people, and he's then giving them hell with stuff like that. People run Docker on Google Compute Engine in VM instances that run on Linux containers on Borg. So it's kind of like all turtles all the way down. It's layer upon layer upon layer, and you're probably not gaining that much from it. And he's also threatening them stuff to, since Windows is now supporting Docker, he's threatening them that everybody needs to use Windows now. And then one consolidates the other and says, it's not so bad, Windows does bash now. So it's pretty nice. So one could say microservices and containers are kind of a cargo cult. And what is a cargo cult? Dilbert always says it best. Yeah, you take the strategy of the big ones, and you just copy one tiny part, like the golf tournaments, and then profits here we come. Which is like, yes, it's great for Netflix to use that, but does it really solve my problems? And my approach was, or is still, Josh Long always says, make jar, not war, which is kind of the fight between the Spring ecosystem and the JE ecosystem. However you stand on that, just produce one jar file that contains all your dependencies and everything you need in your application. And then for me, the JDK always was kind of my container. So on the bottom, I have Amazon, but there's nothing on the Amazon instance I really care about. It's just I get my JDK, and onto the JDK, I throw my jar file, which contains all the dependencies, and I don't really care about anything else. So my jar file is contained. It's just reproducible, and I don't need all the other complexity. Yeah. Pride. Being better than somebody else, which kind of is often the thing that, like, my stuff works so well, I don't really need to check if it is working. To work around that, New Relic is pretty popular. Who's using New Relic? Nobody. Sorry. Okay. The nice thing is with New Relic, if you're hosting on Amazon, they have 3 tiers, like a free one that's basically unusable, a middle one, and the top one. And the middle one is free on Amazon. So for free, that's doing a pretty good job. And it's just monitoring both your instances, so it will warn you you're running out of disk space. It will warn you if you have a memory leak, and it can monitor your JVM or whatever programming language you want to use. You have just agents, they hook into your application, and then extract all kind of system metrics. So it's pretty nice to get the overview and not get the hubris. Everything is working as expected. I just don't monitor it, so I don't know, but I expect everything to be fine. And the other thing that's pretty sweet is Datadog. They have very good integrations into all kinds of services. And they're also pretty cheap. I think it's just $15 per server per month, which in comparison to most others is very, very low. And they have a great overview, so this is cool services just to monitor your stuff and make sure you don't fall into any fallacies. Good. Anybody knows what that is? No, not who, but the sin. Yeah, Kevin Spacey is also true, that's right. Yes, envy. Discontent towards someone's trait, status, abilities, or rewards, which is basically for me the not invented here syndrome. I guess everybody knows the people who have their own libraries for everything, basically everything. I have one person. Luckily, I've never had to work with him because he has his own Java Commons. He has his own. He's called Helga, and he has Helga Commons. And he's like, for everything, he has his own Helga whatever. And he has like 100 GitHub repositories, and he's rolled whatever library you could expect for himself. Which is nice if you're just working on your own, but as soon as you need to get other people onto the project, or especially if you leave a project, you just leave a huge mess behind, and nobody wants to deal with that. Yeah, so I'm coming from the Spring side of things. Who's using stuff like that? So few, okay. If you haven't used it, that's pretty nice. You just say Maven Gradle, the version you want to be built on. Then you just say, yeah, I don't know, my group name, my artifact name, and you can pull in dependencies. You can even pull in, like Lucas Eder is here, who is doing Juke, this abstraction that's supported by Spring Boot now. So more or less everything you can imagine in the Java ecosystem, you can just pull in as dependencies, and Spring Boot will put together a set of versions that are known to work well together, and you don't need to manually keep them up to date. You just update Spring Boot, and it will pull in a set of current versions that are known to work well together. The Maven file can be pretty big, and it's probably not, depending on your style, it might be well readable or not so well readable, but it's still like a huge step just to get your project started. So you just download that thing, and then you can run it from the command line without anything else. So you don't need an application server or servlet container. It's just like, this is a well-defined set of stuff I can simply take and use, and whoever I get into my project, he can also use this stuff, and everybody knows what's going on. So once you know the Spring Boot approach, you can really easily join new projects and be productive and get up to speed, which is pretty big benefit. And then there is the same thing from software to the hardware point. Who's familiar with pets versus kettle? Okay, very few. Okay, so in the past, if you had a server, it was kind of a pet. You got it, you gave it a name, and you knew by name, this is that server, and you kind of raised it by hand. So you would install your server, you would lovingly handcraft every configuration file, and you just knew it, and you knew its defects and its traits, and you just knew that system. And if that server got ill, you would tend to it. So you would make sure it's getting better again, and you could use it for production or whatever. And the different approach is kettle. Kettle don't have a name. You don't know how that cow is called. It's raised without much care, and if it gets ill, it's put down. You don't tend to it. You don't really take care for it too much. It's just like, if it gets ill, you put it down so it won't infest the rest of your stock. And this is the new server approach. So if you have automated everything, it's just like, oh, that server is acting up, that server, I don't know, the hardware has died, whatever. I really don't care. I just throw it out. And since everything is automated, I can just pull it up from zero and have a clean state and can continue working with that. It is pretty hard to get there if you're not used to it, but once you're there, it's really giving you a peace of mind. So otherwise, you always need to document, okay, I've changed this, I've changed this. Just you know that if that server breaks down, you can kind of recreate it, even though you will never get exactly the same version again. If you've automated it, it's just like, I don't care. Throw it out, I'll just recreate it. I love Ansible, because you can kind of do everything with Ansible, and it's super easy to use. And since I'm on AWS, I'm always trying to automate that as well. So with Ansible, you can configure your AWS stuff. So you can say, okay, this is what my network looks like. This is, I don't know, here I need 5 servers, which are web servers. These have this size, this much, disk space. You can do all of that with Ansible. Then you can provision them, so you can put all the software you need onto the servers. You can, I don't know, upgrade the operating system, put OpenJDK on them, and I don't know, whatever you're using for logging or anything, you can just automate all that process. And with Ansible, since it's just SSH-based and push-based, you can also very easily do deployments. So you can simply say, okay, I have these 5 servers behind the load balancer, and Ansible then will go and take out the first server from your load balancer, push your application onto the server, check, is the application up and running? If yes, it will just put the application server back into the load balancer rotation and take out the next one and deploy through all of them, which is super nice once you got it up and running. So this is the only all the things thing that is positive, like automate all the things, just to stay on top and don't run into any major problems. Okay. Yeah, Brad Pitt. What's the sin? Wrath. Also known as rage, exactly. Uncontrolled feelings of hatred and anger. And this is normally when stuff goes wrong and you're pretty much in despair. What is going wrong and what can I do? And the first thing you should always do is you should log. And yeah, we're doing a solution there. I don't know, who is familiar with the Elastic Stack? Okay, who is actually using it? Nobody. Not a single one of you. Okay. Yeah, just to tell you what it's doing, like Elasticsearch is doing kind of the search and storage part. There you throw in all your data. Logstash is gathering log files and kind of enriching them. So enriching them would be you have an Nginx log file and you have IP addresses, and you want to know which country these IP addresses are. And you don't want to look that up when searching because it would be much too slow. So Logstash can ingest your log and then enrich the IP addresses, and with a geodatabase can just put the country in an additional field, and then you can just search by country. Beats is the newer and more lightweight counterpart to it because Logstash is JRuby now, and everybody knows JRuby needs a bit to start up and then needs kind of a lot of memory, or yeah, depending on the standards. Beats is written in Go, so that's much more lightweight. That's just taking files, throwing them over either directly into Elasticsearch or to Logstash. It doesn't do any enrichment. And then Kibana on top is the window into your log files where you can search for stuff and graph the stuff out. So all of these components are open source, and you can simply use them, and it would look something like this. So you have your top visitors, either by how much traffic they've generated, what the status codes were that they've encountered. You can put on heat maps and see where your visitors are from. I don't know, download charts, how much traffic you're generating. All of these things, like you can search through your logs, and then you can just build fancy dashboards and charts based on them. This is the logging aspect part. And secondly, what is also very helpful is collecting stuff and keeping an eye on them. And there's one product I like that's called Sentry. Anybody using Sentry? Sentry is pretty cool. So whenever you have a log statement, either error, warn, info, whatever, Sentry will pick that up, but it can aggregate those because it just knows, okay, it happened in this line of code and it's this error message, and it will just correlate those. And then you can see with whatever error processing to Python on type whatever, that happened 8 times. And then you have this graph like when did it happen the last time. And you can also tie in user accounts, and then you know like how many users have actually been affected by a bug. And if you're just keeping track of all the independent error messages, it can be pretty hard. Because like you're getting errors from every side, and you don't know, like, is this a regression? Has this happened before in the past? Or is this a new thing? And here you have the overview. These are all the things happening, and then you can just go through them and fix them off. And you know, okay, how many users are affected? How important is that? And you can assign each problem, and somebody can then pick that up. And it's integrated into GitHub and stuff. And there is a hosted version and an open source version you can simply run on your stuff. So this is pretty sweet. Good. Time-wise, we're doing pretty well, I guess. Conclusion. Gluttony is kind of the size of stuff. Don't overdo it with size, but don't overdo the small packaging stuff as well. Greed was about, yeah, versions and JBoss and yeah, big bad stuff. The Sloth, don't be too lazy, do continuous deployment, delivery, or at least integration, whatever solves your problems. Lust was the, oh, I'm jumping, envy. Don't do everything yourself. That was like automate stuff, use stuff like Spring Boot that will help to solve your problems. Wrath, log and collect stuff if everything is going wrong. So to channel your rage against something productive and find out what is happening. Pride, don't be too proud of yourself. Just monitor stuff and make sure it's still working. And last was don't always just use the hottest shit because everybody else is doing it. It's not a cargo cult. You don't win by just using the right technologies, you win by actually solving kind of a problem. And if Docker is not solving your actual problem, Docker is nice, but it's probably not really the solution. And yeah, to give you the nicer picture of all the technologies I've talked badly about, at 12:30, Ray is doing a talk on Java-based microservices, containers, and Kubernetes. So I'm sure he will talk much more nicely about these things than me. And if you've mostly forgotten about Se7en, there is an 8-bit version in 4 minutes, which is pretty cool, which just kind of gives you the gist of what it's doing and how, yeah, the movie. So, any questions, any confessions? If there are no questions, and I still got like at least 5 minutes left, I'm doing what my employer loves. I'll just show you what our staff does. So this is, this was called Elk Stack in the past. The Elk Stack is no more because like Elk Stack was Elasticsearch, Logstash, Kibana, but now since there is speeds, we tried to go with Belk, and there even was a logo where it was a bee with the elk horns. That was the Belk, but the Belk didn't work, and now we just call it Elastic Stack. And this is the latest version. This is an alpha, version 5, and this is just running on my local machine in a virtual machine and just gathering all the log files that are happening. So let's see what has happened in the last hour. Probably not that much. Okay, we don't have that many log files since the machine is pretty much idle. Yeah, so you can gather all the log files you have, and if I make the time window bigger again, let's say during the last 24 hours, when did I reboot my machine for the last time? So we have the log message, which is here, so I assume in message, oops, there should be a reboot, and you can see I had to fix a bug tonight, and I rebooted at 2:30 about I rebooted my machine. So you can just search your stuff and see what has been happening. The other thing is you can visualize everything. So here we have the different processes that are running on my machine, and you can probably tell like so we're pretty pragmatic about programming languages. So every of our component is written in a different programming language. So you can see Elasticsearch itself is written in Java. That uses quite a lot of memory. Then the next thing is no Ruby. That's not Ruby. Here we have Puppet, whatever Puppet is doing and why it's running on my machine. That I really don't know. Then we have no, sorry, that's Node actually. That was Node. Kibana, that interface that you're seeing, that's the Node app. Puppet I don't know and I don't care about. Ruby is Logstash, which is enriching my log files, which is not doing all that much. And FileBeat is the actual thing gathering all these files I've shown you. So you can see these things are taking that much memory. And you have many pre-built dashboards you can use, or visualizations, and then you can combine them to dashboards. So if you simply say, I want to see the durable CPU usage, I want to see the memory usage per process, and I want to see I/O, or no, it's just called disk usage. Yes, take that one. You have these dashboards down here, and you can simply say, okay, this one is more important, I'll just make that bigger. And it should scale down, and then you can just say, hey, something happened here, I don't know. I'll drill down into this bit, and these graphics here will adjust. And this is kind of the big dashboard you will put on a TV and in your office and see all the things that are going well or not going not so well with your stuff. And this is now just the VM I'm monitoring, but of course this can do much more stuff. You can just throw in your sales figures, whatever. If you have a web shop, you could just show like, I'm selling these many items, or I'm serving these many 200s and 500s, whatever my web server is doing. So this is what the Elastic Stack can do for you. Okay, Any questions now? Or are we done? Okay, I guess we're done. Yeah, if you have any questions, just ask me. If you want elastic stickers, I've got lots of them with me. Just come to me if you want stickers. Thanks.